Hey everyone, this is BRAINWAVEZ, and in this video I'm gonna show you how to create halftime like a cool customer. This whole project file, as usual, is available on my Patreon, so if you want to get it, check the link in the description, and let's get into it. Alright, so the BPM is 94. The drums are standard halftime drums, so pretty much the pattern that you would have for drum and bass, but in half the speed. A couple of hi-hat loops. And that's for the drums. Then in the synths, I have a brass sample. And with the brass sample, I have one bass preset in here and a sub bass. So the bass that I have going on, it's 2 sine waves FM with that amount. The second sine wave is 1 octave up, a sub oscillator, this LFO modulating these parameters, and some effects like hyperdimension, distortion, multiband compression, filtering, and reverb. The sub is pretty much a sine wave only, with a little bit of distortion. So that sounds like this. Just helping with the downbeats. For the main basses, this is the first one that you hear. So to create this one, you're gonna need the basic WRD wavetable, position 98, level 64, and this LFO shape going at this rate, trigger mode, modulating the coarse pitch of the first oscillator. So you can see in the matrix that is modulating by an amount of 12, and it's set in bipolar mode. Without any post-processing, that sounds like this. Without the coarse pitch, pretty static. Then hyperdimension, just a tiny bit. Phaser, modulating all of these parameters with the first LFO. Still pretty subtle. Then distortion, linear fold, making it way grittier. Then multiband compression. This is what it gives it, like the extra movement. What I did in here was I grouped 2 shifters and I put a macro on the fine tuning and they're on the frequency mode. Also, I put a macro in the dry wet of both of them, and I'm controlling the fine tuning with this automation. That fine tuning is what it's making it sound like that. The reason that I put 2 shifters is just to make the effect more audible. If you don't know how to set a macro, the only thing that you need to do is click on map and then you hit on whatever that you want to map to the macro, and you click, let's say, amount, and then you put mapping here, and that's gonna map the amount to this first macro, which I'm not gonna do because it's already mapped to something else, but that's how you would do it. So that way I don't have to be individually like automating both of these finds. I can just route both of the knobs to the same macro in here, and that's just more convenient and fast in general. Same with the dry wet. I'm not automating it, I'm just put a macro in there, but it's easy to change the dry wet level if I want to for both shifter plugins. So yeah, that's like the secret sauce for this sound. Then I put an EQ, just boosting a little bit in here. Then repeats in here, but I just change the automation shape. So that's the main first bass that you hear. There is another layer which has the same post-processing basically. EQ is being cut at 300 this time. The only difference in the patch is that I put a second oscillator with the harmonic series wavetable, position 5, 51% of the level. I matched the coarse pitch modulation for both of the oscillators, and then I put FM from B, 29%, and that sounds like this. So that's just giving it like a nice top end to the main bass. Then I have a separated sub bass, which is just a sine wave with the second harmonic in here. I'm just doing this little boosting here to make the sub a little bit more audible. And then I have the same coarse pitch modulation and a little bit of tube distortion. So that's the first bass. Then you hear this kind of response bass. So for this one I'm using Vital. The first oscillator is a sine wave. I'm modulating the LFO with this envelope one in here. And I have FM to the second oscillator, which if I enable it, it's the harmonic series once again with these parameters, 1 octave up, and it has FMing to the third oscillator. That's how it sounds so far. The third oscillator is a square wave. Once again, I'm modulating the leveling here. That's how it sounds, and I have a white noise generator, also with the modulation. Then going to the effects, I have compression, distortion, hard clipping mode. That's where most of the sound is coming from actually. And then outside of the rack, I just put an EQ, boosting the sub. I normally would have like a separate sub for this one as well, but just for time's sake I left the sub bass in here. So I'm boosting the sub and I'm decreasing a little bit in here and boosting on the top end. Then I put a FEP filter Pro Q3 just to use the dynamic EQ and to cut a little bit more around this area, which was getting a little bit harsh and resonant. Then there is this other bass, which is pretty similar to the first one. This one has a reverb filter in here with these parameters. And rest is pretty much the same deal, just changing the fine tuning in here and the dry wet. This one is pretty much the same as this one, so I'm not gonna go through it. And then I have like a last response base, which is that one. So I'm making that sound in Serum. I'm using a sine wave, FM from B, and I'm using this first LFO to modulate the level. Then I put a harmonic series with table position 8 and this LFO affecting the level. Notice that the rate is being automated outside of Serum. So we'll take a look on that later, but I just wanted to know that it's not being synced to the project, it's in Hertz. Then I enable a noise oscillator and a sub-bass oscillator. I have hyperdimension, distortion, compression, filtering, and a reverb. Then outside of Serum I put a saturator, cyanoid fold mode, 13 dBs, and output of -8. I'm just playing with all of these parameters in here. EQ8, boosting a lot of the high end. And fab filter once again, just to tame that little area in there. And as I was mentioning, the LFO rate is being automated, so if I disable this automation, definitely it's way more interesting if we have a little bit of movement in the LFO rate. So I did that in the first time, and then the second one it just changes a little bit. That's all of the synths. Then I have a bunch of effects going on, like fills. So this is pretty standard stuff, you know, like impacts and stuff like that. Let me just... What? I'm just making sure that every transition and every element kind of, you know, is well like backed up by some fills and ear candy. So every time that a new element enters or something is about to happen or change, then I put like something beneath that, like in here. What? So you can hear how the glass and then a riser and then an impact, you know, it just goes with the flow of the drop basically, and the call and response pattern. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this one. I hope you found it helpful. As I mentioned in the beginning, the whole project file is available on my Patreon, so check the link below for that. And also I'm doing one-on-one coaching, so if you want to get on a Zoom call with me, also check the link in the description for that. Please leave a like, subscribe, leave a comment, and I hope I see you around.